After almost a year straight of getting Rain Razor 3 of a kinded at every single event I went to, finally, Lexi is the out of here. So what better time than to make a tier list predicting the next meta to come up. So let's just get straight into it. So with the top dog leaving the meta, I think first and foremost, we have to establish who's going to be the new top dogs, and that's going to help us have a reference point onto where we want to put the rest of the heroes when we get around to it, because I do think the new S tier heroes, or the decks to beat, are pretty clear. I think the first one is obviously Dromai. This deck was obviously just a beast while Lexi was here, and since now its main competition is gone. This has benefits and it also has some downsides to it as well, because with the benefits, a lot of decks were getting held away from CC, which actually directly counter Dromai. So the main ones I'm bringing up there is the ninja decks with Fi and Katsu. I think Lexi being able to Arctic Incarceration, send so many on hits that they just don't want to block out, Frostbites from flipping up Winter's Bite, just plain a Winter's Bite, really like just held the ninja decks out of the format, which made Dromai a real force to be reckoned with last better. So I think with Lexi gone, although Dromai is probably the top deck right now, I do think there is a lot of viability to a direct counters to coming into the meta now. So I'm going to put these, I'll get to them when I get to them. But yeah, so I think Dromai is going to be number one. And then I think the other top deck is going to be Icelander. So Icelander was already strong in the previous meta, had a lot of good showings, even though Lexi was its toughest matchup by far. So I think Icelander is one of the biggest winners from Lexi being gone, because that was your toughest matchup, and the main reason that people didn't want to play Icelander was because of Lexi. So honestly, I could see it even being up here. People do like to say that the Dromai matchup's a lot more favored for Dromai side out of these two top decks, but with the drop in their blue count due to the tomes, I have heard that Icelanders find the matchup a lot more easier. And I say easier, but it's still an extremely difficult matchup to play on both sides. So I do think this is a good starting point. Both of these decks are going to be the tier 1 decks, the decks to beat, the decks to watch out for. So leave those there. I think Dromai's a little bit better than Icelander currently, but I could see Icelander being number one. But from here, we'll just go on to the next decks, I guess. We'll go alphabetical for now until we see some weird stuff. So well, first off, we got Arachne. So I still think Arachne is just a worse version of Azuri, so I'll bring Azuri in. They pretty much achieve the same things. They're really good disruptive decks, pretty slow. They don't really have the ability to go super fast. I think Azuri probably has a better chance at being a faster deck when needed. But with that, I also just think that Azuri has a hero ability, I should say, rather than Arachne not really having one that affects the game too much. You could debate that maybe Arachne is better than Azuri at beating the mech decks, the decks that are weaker to fatigue, maybe even Azalea, maybe, but I don't know if that's a real argument. So yeah, I do think Arachne's probably just down in D until Azuri LLs, which is a long way away. With that said, I will say Azuri's probably bottom of A, top of B, somewhere up here. So although she has a pretty tough matchup into both the top decks, we have seen in the past that Azuri can deal with Dromai. I think it was Ben Dodd just this weekend, wasn't it, at Calling Melbourne? We watched an insane game, Azuri versus Dromai. Ben Dodd piloted that insanely well. One of the most exciting matchups of the weekend, and without spoilers, there's a lot of exciting matchups on that Calling Melbourne stream. So yeah, with that said, I think the Azuris are starting to figure out the Dromai matchup a little bit, which is good to hear. I love to hear that. As a Kano player myself, I'd love all the Dromais to die in a fire, so no offense. But yeah, so with that said, I do think Azuri playable into Dromai, not really playable into Wizard, aka Icelander. And I do think with the Lexi gone and Dromai being a top deck, I think the ninjas are going to be coming into the meta like in force. And the thing with that though is Azuri plays really well into both ninjas. I think Azuri just completely destroys Katsu. Frailty tokens just completely shut down your Kadachis, which shuts down your Mask of Momentum, which shuts down your breakpoints from Arsenal, all this bullshit. Too much disruption. Katsu has a lot of 2 blocks as well, so they can't really deal with the isolates into disruption as well. Yeah, so Azuri is just a really tough matchup. With that said, I do think Azuri is pretty good into Fi as well, but Fi is a lot more viable into Azuri. I think playing the Serene Emberblade is a lot more viable. Also, you can just run your Master Pouncing Link, so you don't really care about giving them value for blocking your 3rd head every turn. So I do think Fi might be a little bit better than Katsu because they have the same strengths. So Fi, super good into Dromai, obviously. Matchup into Iceland is probably a little bit worse. since the banning of Belittle a while ago. You could argue that Katsu has the same matchup into Dromai and maybe a little bit better of a matchup into Icelander due to the blues. But with that said, there is some tech stuff that Icelanders can do with giving frostbites and interacting in the effect step on Katsu's hero ability, which can really shut down turns. So won't give away too much there, but I do think Fire probably edges out a little bit. I'll put Fire bottom of A, and I'll put Katsu down here. I've already put these on the field, so I might as well go over them. If you watched all of our previous tier lists, you know that we're super high on OG Dash. As Magic players coming to this game, we understand the power of your deck being able to switchboard into different archetypes, depending on whatever matchup you're versing. I think that's shown even more power when the matchup system in this game is best of one. Puts a lot of pressure onto your opponent straight away into knowing exactly what to board into and be ready for, because Dash can come out as a boost deck, Dash can come out as the pistol control deck, or Dash can come out as the Turtle Dash as well, or not Wombat. Yeah, it's Turtle Dash, Leapfrog Dash, something like that. Tree Frog, that's it. Could even be a Tree Frog Dash. So there's a lot of games that can be won from the get-go. So yeah, I'm super high on Dash. I still think OG Dash is going to be good into this meta as well. Has a pretty decent matchup into Icelander. I know the Dromai matchup isn't favored, but you have the chance to high roll. You can't just discount the Dash being able to double high octane or max V turns, being able to cheese a win from the Dromais, so high roll potential, nothing to scoff at. Has a decent matchup into Azuri. I will say that the Fire matchup's a lot harder than the Katsu matchup, so I think that's starting to solidify me as Fire going into A tier. Fire just a lot more consistent. Katsu being pretty clear on what you want to give your equipment for in order to race the Katsu a lot more better. So yeah, I'm pretty happy to put Dash top of A. I do think she's slightly better than these other two decks. A lot more flexible with the switchboarding mechanic that they can do. With that said, we will also rate the other Dash. So this Dash, obviously, we just watched an insane run by Tom Dowling at the Call in Melbourne. Oh my god, that was such a good live event. Tom Dowling, you're a beast, brother. Holy shit. Broke a record, I heard, as well. So 12-0 or 14. He went 14-0 and then lost in the finals, which is a call-in record for undefeated streak or whatever. I believe that's what I heard. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I think Tom Dowling even said in the interview that he doesn't even think that he's found the perfect list yet. So with a deck being able to perform, break records at a high level event, and the pilot still thinks that the deck has room to improve, I think that's a clear tell that this is going to be easily S tier. But for now, I'm going to leave it on top of A because we still need to figure out a lot of things. Other decks still need to figure out exactly how they want to be able to target the Dash IO. So I'm happy to put it top of A. With that said, if we had to judge it against the matchups here, we were talking about Dash having an unfavorable but a chance to high roll in the Dromai matchup. I think Dash IO probably has a higher chance and more consistent chance to high roll that Dromai matchup. So I would argue that it has a better Dromai matchup. Probably has the same about the same matchup into Icelander. Obviously, you're going to get a lot more hurt from the Channel Lake Frigids because you want to use so many actions. But with that said, Teklo Foundry Heart plus AB3 and the blues and yellows to pay for it. Never a bad place to be when you want to verse an Icelander. Pair that with the ability to just one-shot the Icelander as well, who starts on less health than other heroes. Yeah, it puts you in a really good spot to be able to battle the top decks. And then with these other decks, I do think Azuri, I think Tom Dowling said it himself that Azuri is one of the tougher matchups. I do believe Fire is another tough one because you don't really want to block. The way you want to beat Fire is you need to disrupt his 5-card hands, otherwise his 5-card hands just outvalue yours most of the time. So it's going to be pretty tough. You have to high roll the 5 pretty consistently to be able to beat them because you don't really have the disruption. So yeah, it's somewhere in top of A. I'll probably put it here. Yeah, I'm going to put it here. Middle of A, just below the top because it does have some rough matchups in A if we're going off theory. But yeah, happy with that. And I mean, shit, I put this here, I don't even remember why, but Azalea's here, so I do think Azalea is going to be another force to reckon with. So, in theory, when you first see the Lexi ban, you'd think Azalea and Azuri would be the biggest losers out of the thing because Lexi was a great matchup for them, and that's why they performed very well in the previous metas. So you would assume that they would probably go down with Lexi being kicked out of the meta, but I do think with what I said before with the ninjas probably coming back in force, that these disruptive decks, Azuri and Azalea, are still going to be pretty good into the meta. Pair that with the fact that Dash IO is probably going to be the best aggro deck, and then even more stonks for these disruptive decks. Yeah, I think Azalea is going to be middle of A. I honestly could see Azalea being up here as well. We've seen it calling Taipei, I believe it was. Azalea's matchup into Dromai isn't as bad as what all the Dromai say. I will still say it's a bit unfavorable, but Azalea has a real chance to high roll. Her high rolls are absolutely insane. Like 15 damage, dominate, plus 20 million on hits, disrupt your whole turn, you can only play one action, blah, blah, blah. Really gives you a good edge into beating Dromai. And then I also believe that the Icelander matchup isn't that free either. The Frostbites can really hurt you. I know a lot of viable plays for the Icelander is breaking Storm Striders to give a Frostbite if it's going to prevent them from being able to shoot their arrow and things like that. Obviously, Azaleas can tech and play around it a little bit more if they expect it or all of that jazz. But yeah, I do think Azalea has a decent matchup into both S tier decks and has a decent spread into the A tier. So yeah, maybe Azalea's top of A tier. I could see that now. So yeah, I'll leave that there. So that's pretty good. We got the S tier and the A tier pretty solid. So we can kind of see where the meta is going to go and then just judge the next couple decks based on that. So next one we have Boltyn. I'm not 100% certain where I'd put Boltyn. I'm a bit inexperienced with the deck. I know with Lexi being gone, you're pretty happy because I heard that was a pretty tough matchup. Boltyn pretty famous into fighting decks that have a lot of attack actions like Bravo because it's pretty impossible to block with his hero ability. But yeah, I'm just a little bit of an inexperienced Boltyn player. I'm not too sure. I know that they got a lot of new cards for the wizard matchups and stuff, but the Frostbites and stuff are still a little bit rough for Boltyn to be able to deal with, so I still think Iceland is a bit of a tough matchup. I've heard the Dromai matchup is a little bit tough as well. It's if you play for the combo and then they tumble tie you or can chain some disruption on you just to prevent you from getting your combo off, it's pretty rough. And then when you go raiding, I do hear that the Dromai is able to fatigue you. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's just what I got from the matchup. So I think he's probably the first C tier hero out of all of these. I don't see him being on the Katsu level. I do think Katsu having a great matchup at the Dromai is a little bit more stonks than Boltyn, who's pretty rough into both of them. And I'm not too sure how he goes against these other decks. I've heard that you can fatigue the OG Dash, but not too sure. So yeah, we'll leave him and see. Somebody help me out with that one. Next we got Bravo. I'm down to go B for Bravo, so my Bravo opinion just keeps dropping lower and lower. In theory, you do have a good matchup into Azalea. You have a decent matchup into Fi. You theoretically have a decent matchup into Dashes, but obviously this Dash can go into Pistol Board and then the matchup's kind of unwinnable for you. So you have 3 good matchups in the top, but yeah, it's kind of an auto lose to get paired against a Wizard, and then the Dromais have definitely figured out that matchup. I don't know if you've watched a real Dromai main play that matchup, but that just seems completely unwinnable for the Bravo, even if they completely high roll the whole matchup. I'm expecting to see a couple of these matchups at the Worlds event, not this weekend, weekend after, so excited to see that because I do believe if the Dromai knows how to play Dromai, then the Bravo's never going to win. And you can see that in the deck list as well that Dromais are starting to show. They've taken out Ghostly Touch. They've figured out the matchup that much, so yeah, I don't think Bravo has a great matchup into the top decks. You can snipe a couple of these A-tier decks, but usually that's not good enough to win an event. Maybe not even good enough to top 8. So I'm happy to leave him in B tier here. B for Bravo. Next we got Dory. Yeah, I'm not too sure on Dory either. I'm a little bit inexperienced again. I know Dawnblade Dory into the Dragons used to be a good matchup, but again, I think the Dromai's just figured it out. So I don't believe that's the consensus anymore. Into Icelander, getting a Frostbite before reaction step really, pretty much you might as well just show your whole hand to the Icelander, tell her exactly what you're going to do for the reaction step. So that's always been a rough matchup. Not completely sure how she does into the A-tier matchups though, is my problem. I know she's kind of rough into the Bravo matchup. They can go into the Axe Dory in their switchboard and it makes it a little bit easier. I'm wondering if maybe the Bravo matchup is comparable to the Zuri Azalea one, where they're just going to be able to disrupt you enough. So even if you do get off your 2 swings and then get your counter on Dawnblade, are they just going to completely shut down your next turn anyway? I do expect Frailty tokens to put in a lot of work against Dory, obviously, so yeah, I'm thinking she's probably bottom of C, maybe below Boltyn, but yeah, if any Dory mains want to help me out with that one, hit me up. But yeah, next we got Prism. I think everyone that knows me knows that I'm pretty much on the Prism Hopium. Interesting thing here is she does have a lot of good matchups in the top couple decks. I think she farms Bravo, she farms Icelander, she farms Azalea, she farms Viscerai. I think all those matchups are very good for her, so she has real reason to bring her to an event, especially if one of these decks is going to be suspected one of the decks to beat. Which, yeah, I think that automatically puts her above C tier, since one of the S tier decks is a deck that you can farm with Prism. But with that said, I still don't know if they've figured out the aggro matchups. I gave up on it like almost instantly. So the Ninja matchups, the mech matchups, super tough. So Ninja's just being able to kill all your ward angels. You're obviously never going to have enough damage to kill them. You really have to high roll. I've seen some interesting lists where they try to abuse Tome of Divinity to really high roll their turns and then get ahead that way, but I don't know how consistent that is, how viable that is as a strategy. And then obviously Arclight Sentinel is going to be one of your best cards, and then Achilles Accelerator just completely shuts that down from both of the dashes. So yeah, it's a bit of a toss-up. I'll put her bottom of B because I'm on Hopium and this is my tier list, so I can do whatever I want. So bottom of B for Prism. Next we got Maxx. So we just seen a Maxx top 8 the Corley Melbourne as well from Joel Gibbons, really good player. I think he was a finalist in Osnats last year, not this year, last year, yeah. So good player, great player. Oh, I would have loved if we got an interview on him talking about the good matchups and bad matchups. I do believe he was playing a switchboard type of build where you can choose between if you want to go boost or if you want to go construct mechanoid, pretty similar to OG Dash, but the mechanoid is going to have that combo finish with high octane into 6 overpower, like 5 smacks in a turn and take your whole hand, blah blah blah. So with that as our theory, you can kind of theory craft where your matchups are going to be. You're going to be better into the slower decks where they're not going to be able to one-shot you, give you time to be able to set up your mechanoid. And then if that's the case, then against these aggro decks that are going to be too fast for you, you're not going to be able to set up your mechanoid, and you probably got to go boost and then try and race them. I'm guessing that's probably the weaker version out of the two, so probably tough for Maxx to be able to race as efficiently as OG Dash. So with that said, I don't know about the matchups into these top 2 decks, so I am just going to put them in C as well. I guess C's kind of like my inexperienced tier for now. Like, I'm open to being wrong. I think Maxx could even be a B if we just seen him top 8 while Lexi was in the meta. So yeah, excited to see what happens with Maxx in the future, but I'll put him in C just to be safe right now. Next is Kano. So Kano's obviously my main hero. I would instantly put him in S because I'm super biased, so I'll try and stay humble. I'll put him B for now. If you have to look at the matchups, the meta doesn't look that great for Kano. Kano thrives in a slow, methodical meta where you just get to target all these decks that can't kill you fast enough. Decks like Bravo, decks like Azuri, decks like Icelander, where you're able to just set up a pitch stack and pretty much have a guaranteed win into these decks. But the meta does seem like it's going to be a little bit too quick with the new Dash IO. OG Dash, Fi, Katsu, these decks are going to be able to boost your head off. Obviously, we've seen Dromai just get tomes, which I don't know why the fuck they printed that, but they ruined my entire life by doing that. So tomes in Dromai, absolutely insane for the matchup. Helps them find their rakes, find their Thermais, find their prevention effects, all that bullshit. So yeah, Dromai matchup, really tough. Icelander, I do think you can pitch stack into it. I know a lot of people say you can't, but you can watch all my vids on Patreon if you want. So you have a couple good matchups in the A and S tier in Icelander and Azuri, and then even your rough matchups, you can pretty much change them into a full coin flip by just playing completely for your high roll, just blind flipping in the most random spots and trying to cheese a win like that. And so that's not something that you can just look over. You can always cheese out some wins. So I'll leave him in B tier for now. He's got some decks that you can target, and then yeah, if you run hot, then you might just steal a whole tournament. So I'll leave him there for now and be humble about it. Next we got Levia. So pretty interesting actually. I do think the brutes are slowly climbing up the ranks and like how viable they're starting to become. So with Lexi gone, that's another terrible matchup for both of them. That's just gone on top of Briar. So with the Briar LL into the Lexi LL, and now the top deck's also Dromai, which is another decent matchup. Just having a million poppers and then having the damage to punish them, strip their whole hand, or kill them. Very viable. So I do think Levia and Reiner might actually be up here. I do think Levia probably has a worse matchup into Icelander than Reiner, which is pretty interesting. Am I really about to put Reiner above Levia? I don't know about that. But yeah, to speak on that, I think Levia is probably slightly weaker into the 2 S tier heroes than Reiner is, but I would say that Levia has a better matchup into the rest of the A tier. Probably just more consistent with access to carry and husk and just better equipment overall. Helps her get around the dominates, the disruption, being able to keep her blood rush hands as opposed to Rhina. I also think that all that equipment block pays a lot against these aggro matchups that are just trying to race your head off. Whereas Rhina only has access to the flesh bag, which is still very good as a headpiece to be able to shut down an opponent's turn, let you keep your blood rushes, and cheese a win from there. So pretty interesting. I don't know exactly where I want to put him. Maybe I'll still put Katsu up here. Yeah, so I'd say Levia overall probably has better matchup into the field, whereas Rhina, if you're expecting all Icelanders in Jorma, it makes sense to just lock in Rhina. I'm not gonna lie. So yeah, we'll go with that for now. Next, I think there's a Lexi, get the fuck out of here. After that, we got Riptide. I think Riptide has the same curse as Arachne, so there's just a better ranger in the meta right now. So first it was Lexi, but now it's Azalea as the better rangers than Riptide. I do think Riptide has some viability though in that aggro meta. Really disruptive. He also has access to that legendary trap that, I forgot what it's called. It deals damage equal to the number of the same card name that it blocks or whatever, equal to the cards in their graveyard, blah, 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 something like that, which is actually very good against decks that want to run 9 of 0 to 60s and 9 of zipper hits. So, I mean, that's nothing to scoff at. It debatably has a better matchup into the mechs as Azalea does. But with that said, I do still think it's very rough into the top 2 decks, so you're targeting very specific decks by bringing Riptide, probably like decks like Ninjas and then the mech decks, but yeah, so not having that angle to be able to pivot into a more aggro deck like Azalea does, really just puts him down into D tier, sadly. There's just a better option with Azalea. Azalea is able to do all the same things that Riptide does, target all the same decks and beat them convincingly, while still having a pretty decent matchup into the 2 S tier decks. So pretty sad, but yeah, Riptide's down to D still. Speaking of D, there's also Vynnset. I am a little bit inexperienced. We have seen some ProQuest results these past couple of weeks for Vynnset, but I do think she's down here. I'm not too sure who you're targeting when you pick Vynnset. I would love to hear in the comments what you guys think you're targeting when you bring Vynnset to a tournament. I'm not exactly sure where your good matchups are and your tough matchups, so sorry about that one. In theory, you have a couple poppers for Dromai, but it's not that many. I know Vynnset just has access to being able to do 20-30 damage turns, but obviously they require a little bit of setup and some things that go the right way for you. I don't think she has that great of a matchup into Icelander, although if you think about it, she can bring AB3, maybe even AB4 with Spell Void pretty convincingly, which maybe that turns the matchup a little bit better for Icelander, but yeah, I'm just a little bit unsure. I'll leave her in C as well. I guess C is going to be my uncertain tier, so yeah, I'll leave Vynnset in C for now, but yeah, I could easily see her being bottom of D, I'm not gonna lie, so we'll leave her in C. Next we got Teklovossen. Pretty sad, one of the coolest fucking heroes to come out. I don't think that we've figured out the best Teklovossen deck. He's probably one of those decks that you need to know the exact meta that you're walking into when you present a meta tournament, so I'm expecting some mad scientists to come up with some insane Teklovossen deck that is going to be able to deal with the meta, but straight up, I don't think you can beat Icelander because you need mechs, but you also need AB, and then that Dromai matchup seemed so doomed when I was trying to play it. You don't really have that many poppers, and you don't have the ability to race them down fast enough. While you're setting up your mech pieces, they're just setting up dragons, so yeah, it gets really tough, so not too sure how you're going to do into the A tier decks either. Azalea might just be able to disrupt you enough. I'm not too sure. I think the mech matchups might be good for you. I know the fire matchup was absolutely terrible when I was practicing it. They're just way too fast for you to sit around setting up your mechs. So yeah, hopefully somebody can come up with a cool list because I thought that hero was fucking G. But last but not least, we got Vis. Yeah, I think this is probably like bottom of C, bottom of D. Losing Rosetta was a lot bigger than I even thought at the start, and I knew it was huge. I knew you lost access to your best play line of Mauve Shrill Rosetta off of 3 cards, which is insane. But you also just lose the reason to play Viscerai, because I think one of the main reasons was that he had a decent matchup into Dromai. But with the loss of Rosetta, being able to kill a dragon, shoot your Rune Chant and the Arcane at Dromai while doing that, yeah, you just lost pretty much your 2 biggest reasons to play Viscerai with the banning of Rosetta. So pretty sad. I would even put... I'd actually say that he might actually be the worst deck. But the thing is, you're still an aggro deck, so you'll still be able to cheese out some wins against these other decks. So, no, yeah, I see him top of D. But, yeah, so I think that's all the heroes. We'll do a last quick look over everything. I think everything's in a good order that I'm happy with. The interesting ones are obviously a couple of these B tier heroes, with Rhino coming up middle of B. This is complete theory crafted, by the way. I also think Prism's pretty good at targeting a couple decks. I think it targets a couple decks maybe worse than Kano. And then also I think Bravo probably targets less decks than these two. But maybe Dash.io is going to be a little bit more popular, and then you can farm that. So I'll go like this. Happy to put it something like that, but that's it for the tier list. Tell me what you guys think below. I would love anybody that knows about Boltyn, Dory, Vynnset, all these decks down here. Tell me about the good matchups, the bad matchups, all of that good stuff. But lastly, I want to shout out the sponsor of this video, Midtowngameexchange. Your one-stop shop for all things flesh and blood. If you're looking to either get into the game or just looking to expand your collection, make sure to head over to midtowngameexchange.com for quite literally the most affordable prices on the whole internet. We thank you guys again for your support. We truly do appreciate it.